There we go. Hello, everybody. My name is Carlos Siqueira. I'm the leader of the Salesforce Architect Group in Tampa, Florida. The event is not about me; it's about architects, and we're keeping the bar really high in here. So today we have Melissa, which is a CTA, needs no introduction, but she will introduce herself anyway, no matter what I say. So, Melissa, take it away. It's your show.
Thank you, Carlos. Hello, I'm Melissa Shea. I am a CTA. I live in Boston, Massachusetts. I'm the founder and CEO of consulting. I'm also of a nonprofit called Scale Up Arts, which is getting launched this year. So I also lead the Boston group, and also I am the founder and admin of the Architect Ohana Slack. I forgot to put my bio slide in here, so anyways, we'll just jump right into it. So I wanted to present to you about Archival, an area that I feel when people are getting into the CTA journey or architect journey, they think about Archival, they don't really understand it, or when they suggest it, they just say, yeah, we're going to move some data off platform, we're going to archive it, and they don't really get into the details. So this is going to go over why you would want to think about archive, how you might want to use AWS as an option for it. So, first of all, why Archival? So Salesforce is not a cost or scalable solution for storing data and files long-term. And if storage limits are hit, this can cause performance degradation once it's beyond 100%. So once this happens, then you'll need to buy more storage at this point to continue your operations. So when architecting solutions, you need to take into consideration your data and storage over time. So it's critical to define upfront before your limits are hit, and then store data and files for regulatory, legal, and data retention policies as well. So those type of things in play that are going to force you to need to put everything somewhere so it doesn't just sit on the Salesforce platform forever. So what you want to try is a growth rate for both your data and files over time based on your historic storage needs. And then you want to look at how your platform is going to scale, growth rate might look like. So for calculating your storage, you want to look at your edition that you have. So this is just the base, the 10 gigabytes you get for Contact, Group, Professional, Enterprise, Performance, and Unlimited. So then that's 10 gigabytes. So then for Enterprise, Performance, and Unlimited, of file storage per user license. So the file storage includes files and attachments, files home, Salesforce CRM content, chatter files, including user photos, the custom file field on knowledge articles and site.com assets. Then you want to do the same with your data. So for your data, you also get for Contact Group, I believe this is for the data, you get the 10 gigabyte for data, yep. And then for Contact Group, Professional, Enterprise, you get 20 megabyte per user license, but for Performance and Unlimited, you get 120 megabytes per user license. So you can see how your storage is very dependent upon your user licenses. So you need to figure out how many people are going to be using the system, do your calculations based on that. So I gave an example here. So if you have an enterprise org with 100 users, your file storage would be your 10 gigabytes plus 2 gigabytes per 100 users. So you get 210 total. Your data would be the 10 gigabytes plus the 120 megabytes. Oh, no, that's Performance and Unlimited. Sorry. This would be, let's say it's Performance, not Enterprise. So these numbers would be for the Performance and Unlimited. You get 22 gigabytes of storage to fix that.
Melissa, a minute here.
Yep.
Can everybody see your screen? Because I can't see anything.
You can't?
No, is everybody able to see it?
I can see it.
Yeah, Carlos, I made my screen wider and it came back because for me it was hidden for a little bit.
Oh, okay, yeah. This is the
But I can
first
see it
time
again.
me using Bevy. I'm not using Zoom, so okay, take it away. No problem. I get the recording.
Okay, so that's just a little bit about your storage needs and how you might want to calculate those. So then you might be asking why AWS. So AWS is an option out there these days. It's very scalable. It's very cost effective. Salesforce, more of an optimal solution. And then there are many products out there, so Exchange, that are for Salesforce that work with AWS on the back end. So AWS has what's known as a well-architected infrastructure. That's Salesforce with well-architected infrastructure, or well-architected framework is what it's called. So it's based on what AWS has put out. So example of your S3 buckets and your Amazon RDS and the network within while you're getting into the AWS cloud through the network, so through the internet. So Salesforce actually does have a secure link between Salesforce and AWS, which is pretty cool.
Okay, now the
So there-
screen is dark. I'm sorry.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Could you see the
No, I can just see the.
I can still see it.
Interesting.
Yeah, I can see it now. I can see the word AWS options, Amazon, but if
No, it's
the rest of people can see it,
No,
that works. I mean, it is what it is,
Got it. Sorry to
Okay.
interrupt. I just had no see the.
That's very strange. Okay,
now it's-
so so Amazon has a few different options for storage. So there's S3, which is storage for the internet. Or both files and data here. So S3 stores data as objects, which is kind of nice because Salesforce also stores data as objects. So it contains files and metadata that are uploaded and stored into the S3 buckets. Then Amazon also has something called Elastic File System for files, specifically for files. It's a simple, scalable, fully managed Elastic File System. It automatically scales as you add a, so you don't need to worry about provisioning capacity to accommodate growth. Then there's also for data. So Amazon warehouse that makes it simple and cost effective. Your data warehouse and data lake. So it's more like, I think that's more like where you're going to put your data. And then something else that was really cool discovered is there's Amazon S3 Glacier, which is for your long-term storage. So you can move stuff to S3 buckets for like a shorter term storage, and then over time they could get archived even further into this Glacier for much longer term. So it's a secure and durable service for low-cost data archiving and long-term backup. So something AWS provides is lifecycle configuration rules. So you can tell S3 to automatically transition objects to the less expensive storage classes, archive or delete. For example, you can set Amazon S3 bucket to archive objects to Amazon S3 Glacier after a certain amount of days, like 30 days, and then delete them after 5 years. So that's actually something pretty cool that AWS provides. So the next thing is let's get to the migration. So you have to, at some point, get all this data and files off of Salesforce into AWS. Some options are you could build a custom solution. You can use Apex, the AWS APIs. There's also the AWS JavaScript SDKs. So there's the AWS SDK for Apex. So that's specifically for Salesforce. It makes it easier for developers to add Amazon Web Services in their Apex code. And build robust applications and software using services like S3, EC2, etc. Then you also have the Amazon Simple Storage service, the S3 SDK. So that's an Apex client that manipulates both buckets and contents. So you can create and destroy objects, give it the bucket name and the object key. So going this route, this could get complex, especially for things like unarchival and then re-exposing data and files to external users. So you're going to have to build all that yourself. And then this would be a slower time to market, and which would be less value for your users. And then building a custom solution like this, you would need to go through the whole dev life cycle, deal with the environments, testing, get through all the different environments in your sandbox setup, and go through all the the testing around different rounds of testing and the different. It just makes it more complex if you're going to build custom. So that brings me to the next slide. So things you are going to think about. So when and how to. What is the trigger? Are you going to go automate it? Are you going to set up a scheduled ETL job to pull the data out of Salesforce? Are you going to make it manual, such as give a button to your users to say, I want to archive this? Or maybe it's a common. When to hard delete your data and files that you're archiving off the Salesforce platform. So you got to think about getting everything over to the other platform, getting everything over to AWS, and then determine if it made, and decide, okay, when do we actually come back and delete all this stuff once we know that everything's successfully made it to the other platform. And some other things you got to think about is how will internal users access both the archived data and the files when necessary. And then when the data is archived, how would you re-expose those files to external users? The data, maybe you have files that are associated to a certain record, but you're archiving that data so that record no longer exists in Salesforce, but maybe those external users need to still access those files. How are you going to have them access those? So there's a lot of different things here come into play. Get a lot more complex when you're building a custom solution or even going the box. So I would always suggest go to App Exchange. Go with something that's already built. There's that can help you move things to AWS. So something I played around with and got really familiar with for my files was S Drive. There's a lot of people out there that are very familiar with X Files Pro. So those are two options when archiving and re-exposing your files to your external users. So they make it so easy to maybe set up a schedule or trigger these files to get moved. They get moved over to S3, and then they make it very easy by giving you components in Salesforce to show those files to your users that maybe you drop on like an account page. Data. There's the own backup archiver that will use S3. From what I was told, you can use own backup specifically with Amazon, with AWS. There's also Data Archiva, and then Data Connectiva. So those are some other options you could look into, so that they're going to make it a lot easier for you to move and then re-expose that data to your users. So here's a screenshot of what S Drive would look like. So I just dropped the S Drive component on my account page, and it would then show these archive maybe from other objects over to S Drive, and then you can then show these files just on the user's account. So it could be like something that says archive files, and then they know to look for old in this component. And that was it. I mean, it's a short presentation. I didn't want to get into the depths of like a custom solution, because I don't think a solution is the way to go or the optimal solution. I always the different products and how they can be best used, to get things up and running quickly. And just wanted to bring some awareness to the fact that you should be thinking about archival and the routes that you can go, and that AWS is a good option. I don't know if you want to open this up to Q&A to discuss more about this and get more into details of archival, or how you wanted to do this.
I suggest. I mean, we have a I believe very experienced people on the call, so people feel free to ask, or if you don't agree with what she said, hey, you hurt my feelings, you won't hurt her feelings either. She's a CTA, so take it as it is. So any comments is always, you're always learning here. So people feel free.
So hey, Melissa. Yeah, thank you for the overview. I'm really, I was really excited to see this session come up, because I'm actually in the middle of this right now. My org has 8 terabytes of data in it.
Oh boy.
And I've never seen an org this big before, and it definitely needs an archival strategy. So what I'm looking at right now is I'm going to take about 30% of the data and I'm going to put it into external objects because it does need to be accessible from Salesforce real time in small batches. I also need to archive data that's older than whatever, 6, 12 months, depending on the tables. And then I also have to do some purge after the data is the life cycle is, right? So right now I'm looking at Salesforce Connect to connect the Salesforce org to Amazon. I'm looking at either DynamoDB, Athena, or maybe S3 bucket. So that's one of the questions I have here, right? Does anybody have any experience between those three? What would you recommend? And this is for data that may need to be unarchived.
Yeah. So how are you going to do the archiving? Did you
I haven't gotten that far yet. Right now,
Okay.
no, right now I'm getting a complimentary license for Salesforce Connect to see how everything's going to connect. And by the way, one of my use cases is the data is already in AWS. It's a Teradata database housed in AWS. I'm going to expose to my Salesforce org. About 20% of my data is being replicated into Salesforce, and it does not need to be. So that's my first use case. My second use case is actually moving data from Salesforce to archive it on a timely basis. Have not played with that at all yet.
Yeah. So the first one, Salesforce Connect, is a good use case for that. The second one, Salesforce Connect, is not going to solve the archival problem. And then unarchiving it. So either custom solution or going with something like one of these other things on App Exchange for archiving and re-exposing the data. Still use Salesforce Connect to re-expose the data after you archive it. But then you have to deal with unarchiving. So that's why I like tools is they also provide the unarchival feature. There is, there's things you can do custom to do that, but it's just going to take more work. So those are the two use cases. Did you have something else?
No, we do own backup as a product. We're using it for backing up. I just used it today for seeing a sandbox. It's the first time I used it for that. It was really good. I need to see if we would use that for archiving into our own AWS databases instead of theirs, because own backup actually runs on AWS. So once you have that, you're actually archiving to AWS, right? But because of our large data volumes, it's been having challenges. So I don't know that it's the right tool. I still need to see what we're going to do there.
Did you look at the own backup archiver solution?
We have it. It's not working for us properly.
Oh, okay. All right. So you actually have that. Interesting.
Yeah.
This data.
It's not working properly.
So Kiva, that was on your presentation. I think this is the only native.
Yep.
Right now, have you guys looked into that? Because I signed up, I haven't tried it yet. I'm actually kind of excited to give it a shot. That's probably the first place I'd go. And as far as virtualizing the files, another option would be, well, S3 buckets, that's really for binary files, not so much data. What wasn't in the presentation, which I will always call out, S3 link. So S3 link is wonderful to be able to just drop the file through the Salesforce UI. And then what it will do is transfer it to the bucket and immediately delete it from Salesforce files. So then it will expose to S3 file component.
Is that a product, S3 Link?
Yeah. Remember there was a recorded session that we shared with the rest of the group?
Yep, I do.
There you go. So no, it's an excellent product, and it's actually quite cost effective.
Oh.
It's good for communities. It's good for the CRM licenses. And basically you get
I also have 3 files that I need to figure out and start moving. So the same thing, right? They come in as cases. Actually, those I would like to move to S3 bucket as they come in and then just create a link to them and not even store them in Salesforce. But that's later. That's not my main problem right now.
So the S3 link will do that for you out of the box. Just what you described. Yeah. And
Melissa, I have somebody from Brazil that he was trying to join. He couldn't, but he mentioned this to me a few weeks back. He has a lot of files, like in the classic, you have all those attachments.
Yep.
And since I think I believe it's an insurance company or a B2B, I don't remember, but he had a lot of that. And I said, well, why don't you try to do something almost like data warehouse, where you put all of those things outside of the Salesforce. He was hitting the
Yep.
limit.
Yep.
Do you think your explanation, your case here will be a solution for him?
Yep, absolutely. So with files, yeah, he could use S3 and then use one of those products like X Files Pro or S Drive or S3 Link. S3 Link, was that for files or data?
Files. Strictly files.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. So or S3 Link.
It's strictly for
Okay.
S3.
Yeah, the
If he
files
doesn't,
and the data are.
well, if he doesn't get into the call, I will probably talk to him. I have somebody on the call that is one of the top guys in Brazil about MuleSoft. He might have something to ask. He might have something to say. Josué, please introduce yourself.
Come on, Carlos. I'm not the guy that you basically said about me. Very nice to meet you all, guys. My name is José Nogueira from Brazil. Actually, I'm a senior manager at Capgemini in Brazil, leading our MuleSoft practice here. To be honest, I joined this session pretty late, so I need to watch the recordings and then I can send a mail to Melissa or whatever person is here. So, but thanks so much for your time.
Okay. So, any more comments, feedbacks, news? Anybody getting married? No, I'm kidding.
So the biggest question is, so yes, you can build custom solutions, right? You're using Redshift.
Yep.
However, why not use Snowflake, for instance? There have to be some pre-built
Right.
connectors and
because-
solutions already.
Yeah. So AWS is an option just because a lot of times companies will bring in AWS or they'll already have it, or it's just an option where it just makes sense. And if you're going to use AWS for files, why not use it for data too? You could use something like Snowflake for data and AWS for your files. It's really just showing that you get to think about it, and AWS. So,
Gotcha.
but yeah,
Is
some
it-
companies already will have Snowflake in their landscape. So, you might, when it comes to, so this is really talking more like real life. When you're talking like CTA review board, sometimes you'll see scenarios where there will be AWS in the system landscape. And that's kind of your cue to say, yeah, it makes sense to just go with AWS. So to get familiar with AWS and presenting it as an option, I would say is a good thing for anyone going for the review board.
So then the identity management,
Good
you have
advice.
to also do that in AWS. It's at least for like S3 buckets, there's so many different types of, I guess, access profiles within AWS.
So that's one thing I probably should add in here. S Drive, the one thing I really liked about S Drive is it made the security so simple. It created a child object with a master detail lookup to the main object. So whatever the user has access to on the main object, they'll have access to in the child object, I believe. And that's the links to the files, if I remember that correctly. So it really uses the Salesforce security for what files a user has access to. Because there's the child object that holds the information on the files over in S3. So
yeah, same
Does that
thing
make
with
sense?
S3 link does the same as S3 file. But then you still have to use Authenticate originally, right, into AWS with public-private keys.
there's that. It's like a one public and private key that you use for the connection, and then it uses the Salesforce security to show the files to the users.
But the access policy needs to be first defined in AWS. Otherwise, you might be able to also delete somebody else's files, as opposed to just,
You mean if they go directly to AWS?
No, you could even do it. I'm not sure about S Drive, but through Salesforce, you might be able to do that too. So you have to define those policies in AWS first, I believe, right?
Yeah, if you use something like S Drive, it hides all that. Like the users wouldn't even be able to see files that don't belong to them. So if they delete a file that they can see and someone else can see it, then yeah, you have an issue there. But yeah.
But Marlene, is there an ESB in your landscape?
There is. We're using MuleSoft.
Gotcha. All right. So then, are you going to run the Salesforce Connect through MuleSoft?
I'm not planning to. Is there
Isn't
a
that-
benefit to using MuleSoft in between?
Yeah, I think that's the preferred method, isn't it? If you have MuleSoft, you just run Salesforce Connect through it.
Right now, like I said, I'm getting the complimentary version, hopefully in a week or two, for me to start playing with it. I was going to connect to it directly because it's going to Teradata. I did let my procurement team know that we'll need multiple licenses per target, right, per source. And so right now, one of our, for the external objects, it'll be the Teradata. But right now for the archival, I just haven't decided how to move forward with it. I'm working with the AWS team, internal and external, to see what they are offering. That's why they brought up the DynamoDBs and Athena. Athena basically converts your S3 files to make them accessible through Salesforce as external objects. But again, I have not played with it yet. It's just what they've been telling me.
That might be the most expensive way to go about it, is in terms of files. But like, I'm just thinking there's
Well,
going
right
to be
now we're paying for data storage. We're
That's
paying for
ridiculous.
data storage for 7 terabytes right now. So
Yeah,
I can't share how much we're spending. It's a lot.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. So,
Yeah.
so the OData layer, Melissa, correct me if I'm wrong here, please. For the OData layer, that will also have limits as to how many records you can visualize using Salesforce Connect. So, like Skyvia,
Yep.
for instance, even with the highest level, there's going to be a limit. So maybe MuleSoft will up that limit, maybe not. I don't know.
Now, if
Salesforce
I'm using external
Connect-
objects, I have the same limits, right?
Yep, external objects have the OData callout limits, 20,000
Yeah.
rows an hour or something like that And I-
20,000 rows per call, I think.
per call. And then there's a 20,000, there's a per hour limit too. Let's see.
It's higher than that. I think I'm going to say it's 250. It falls well within my needs for the group that is using this data. That's the funny thing. I think I have like 10% of my users using this data maybe 4 or 5 days a month, and it's 20% of my data storage. It's insane.
So 20,000 OData callouts per hour for enterprise performance and unlimited. And then, so that's the per hour. And then there's the maximum amount of rows that are retrieved as well. Where is this? There's a couple different limits for it. So 100,000 maximum new rows retrieved by social and Salesforce searches per hour. That's 100,000. It doesn't apply to high data sources. Maximum new rows retrieved or created per hour, 100,000. So there's a 20,000 call out limit, and then the rows per hour. I worked with a company that actually was having issues with the call out limits, but I think they weren't filtering or something like that when they were retrieving data.
Yeah, the callouts basically at an account level, they're going to say for this account, give me all the related records. And accounts tend to have anywhere from 5,000 to 8,000 rows per account, so I should be okay.
That's good.
I think, yeah. One of the questions I have, and I don't know if you guys know, a lot of my users are not domestic; they're international. So we're already getting some latency issues because they're hitting a North American node, right? I'm waiting to see once we do this POC how the external objects perform when somebody's calling it from APAC or Europe or wherever they are in the world. So I will know a lot about this in the next 6 months.
Fun.
You need to do a
Take a
presentation.
look on the chat. We have some posts in there that has put something there about Skyvia.com pricing. Yeah.
So I actually
it's
used
always
this
good.
on the project. I used Skyvia on the project once where they had to use the highest tier to be able to query. So I know that you guys are talking about the Salesforce Connect limits, but this layer, the OData layer, if you're not going to go through MuleSoft, this will give you an additional, limit as to how many records you can actually access per month. Okay.
Is it using Salesforce Connect though?
Yes, exactly.
It is?
Yeah, this is for Salesforce Connect.
Because I thought the external object limits is what would kick in regardless of what I used.
Yeah.
Well, better check on that.
Is it because maybe it's
I used to use
something else?
Yeah, I don't think they're using Salesforce Connect because otherwise the limits would hit.
This was specifically for Salesforce Connect, and the benefit to this particular solution is that you could get it up and running quickly and require no code. And so basically you query the external objects. Once you set up the external data source in Salesforce, the external objects will show up just like that. But Skyvia has to do the connection, if you will, to Salesforce Connect. So that's the OData layer that it provides. So if you have MuleSoft, I would consider running Salesforce Connect through MuleSoft, which has its own limits, of course, versus something like this.
Yeah, I'll talk to the MuleSoft team. My problem right now is that they're very, very overtaxed, and resources are going to be very slow for me to get. So that's one of the reasons I was going to bypass them, at least with proof of concept, just to see how it works. Again, the latency issue for international is a concern. That's a large usage for this particular data.
So as a POC, then this is a perfect choice. If you go with Skyvia, it's going to be pretty quick. You'll be able to set this up yourself.
My security and procurement process takes about 6 months.
Once you go through that, you'll be able to set it up yourself. Good Lord.
Yeah, I don't have that kind of time. We're at 100% data storage. And so I'm doing a whole bunch of things to purge and archive data that isn't needed in Salesforce now just to manage it. We're creating something like 4 million records in the system every day. And so I'm running behind how many records we're creating every day. I think we've purged 120 million records in the past 2 weeks, and I'm still at 100%. If it wasn't for the purging I've been doing, I'd be 125%. So at least I'm better off than I would be. In the past, I've used a product called DBAMP, but we used to have an on-premise SQL data store, right? And it was great for that. It was super cheap, $25 a year for the license to connect to as many SQL servers as you wanted, as many sandboxes and production environments as you wanted. But for archival, it would be good, but it's not good for virtualizing data.
Right.
Gotcha. So
plus my data store is not SQL based anymore. So
yeah.
Marlene, in Slack, Melissa guys just shared with you the link to the recorded S3 Link presentation, which
awesome.
The creator of S3 Link did for us in my study group. So this will give you a very comprehensive overview of what it does. And then if you could try it in the sandbox, I think it's unlimited in the sandbox for forever. So that's
great.
exactly.
Thank you.
I think that's exactly what you need for files, but not data.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Folks, any other comments or questions? I want to share my screen here with something, but keep talking or comments.
I have a non-data related question for last, but I want to let other people ask and talk questions because that way you guys can cover other topics.
No, go ahead with your question.
Before Carlos
are you sure? Anybody else want to
go? No. Trust me.
So this is around identity, completely different scenario. So we have third-party vendors, SIs, and so on. They need access to lower environments, but we do not want to give them access to production, right? So even a dummy account, dummy profile, I'm getting some pushback and not doing that. And so we have Okta as a provider. I've also used Ping Federal in the past. And so one of the ideas we're throwing around is actually making Salesforce the identity provider in production, still creating the users with a absolutely no access profile for them to be in production and then connect the lower environments to production for authentication. It's just an idea. I didn't know if you guys had any kind of experience in getting SIs access to lower environments and remove them, right? Because that's the whole thing. Right now, I can still access my old company's, my developer sandbox, which I won't, but I could because that's not managed that way. So just questions. How do you grant SIs access just to lower environments and manage deactivation easily?
So using production as an IDP for your sandbox access is a common scenario. It's interesting for the use case for SIs that makes sense. But yeah, I mean it's a legitimate solution. Have your production be your IDP.
Yeah, somebody suggested dedicating a sandbox just for IDP purposes. That way you never put your SIs into production. My only point there was technically I think that breaks the contract because then you're using a lower environment for a production purpose.
Yep.
I don't know the Salesforce would really care, but technically you are violating the contract.
Yep, and then if you refresh it, then you're in trouble.
Yeah, that was my other question. They said they would basically make that a dedicated environment just for that. I'm like, well, as soon as you make it dedicated just for that, that's when the contract kicks in. And if you don't refresh it, you know what's going to happen, those kind of things. But yeah, I'll let them know because we were toying around with using production for it. That's actually my next certification. So my point was in a couple of months, once I start studying for that, I will test it out and see how it works. But it's what popped into my mind for it.
So are you using Okta as an identity store as well?
So I have two scenarios. Currently, I'm using Okta. The person I was speaking with, a different company, they're using Ping Federate. So yes, they're having problems connecting all of the lower environments to Ping Federate because it's Ping Federate is just not handling it well. And so that's why we decided, well, just do one connection to production and then have that be your master for your lower environments, both for internal employees and external providers.
Right, but where's the identity store? Is that AD, Active Directory, or is it all in, say,
Active Directory?
Active Directory. Okay.
Active Directory.
So then you're provisioning basically the email addresses with your domain for the SIs? It's like a government contractor kind of model?
I'm trying to remember, this is somebody I used to work with. And so you become a contractor, you do get a company address, you get added to the AD groups. That gets you added to Ping Federate, which gets you provisioned to Salesforce, and there's an AD group per environment, and that's where they're blowing up. They're creating too many AD groups for all the lower environments, plus they all come and go. The lower environments get added and removed, so that's really what's causing the problem with Ping Federate. And then when you become inactive in the AD group in Ping Federate, then that deactivates you in production or whatever environments they're in. When I was working there, we had 5 environments set up that way with Ping Federate, and that was working well. But now they have so many projects going on at the same time that they're overwhelmed.
Are we talking hundreds of people and hundreds of environments? Or?
I don't know. No, I would guess it's maybe 20 to 40 environments, knowing the volume of projects they're doing right now concurrently. And teams, I think they were shooting for 5 to 10 people per project. So if it's 40 projects, let's say it's 400 people.
It's quite a bit. Are they refreshing these sandboxes frequently, or are they just keeping them in sync by using back deployments, back promotion?
When I was there, they had a repo that was being used to keep the metadata up to date, and the sandbox was being created per project. And so once the project started, you just kept it at that point and did not refresh it. The environments that I had connected, those 5 were refreshed regularly. They were our dev, QA, integrated, and UAT in production. And so those were the ones that were refreshed on a scheduled basis. And that's why they were connected directly.
So every time they do that, they would have to reconnect that for identity management purposes, right? Because all the emails did get reset.
Every time we, as long as you had the federated ID, it didn't matter. But yeah, because you were using SSO. That's what made it nice. Nobody needed to know the password. That also simplified MFA because we're using Ping Federate for MFA. Right now I'm using Azure, where I am here, for MFA. Right? So those things got simpler because you're using federated ID.
And I'm shocked that Ping Federate can handle something like this. It's a bigger provider.
I don't know if it's a resource issue. Again, this, like everybody, right? Every company is going through attrition, new employees, loss of knowledge. I don't know if it's that, or if the tool is just falling down, or if it's processes. I have a feeling it's a little bit of everything. I know when I left, there were thousands of AD groups. Some of them were used, some of them weren't. I had created 15 for my Salesforce environments, because I had 3 per environment when I left. And so they mushroom very, very fast. So it might just be not that it can't handle it systematically, but the business process is falling apart.
Gotcha. Well, maybe it's time to bring in Accenture and just throw bodies at the project and have them prune all of those groups.
They have plenty of bodies to throw in the project. That may actually be the problem. Too many new people that don't know what's going on. They have 3 major integrators in-house, plus a lot of boutiques. Again, confidential, so I'm not going to share who I'm talking about or what the providers are. But they have a lot of people in the kitchen. I chose to get out.
Hey, I don't envy you. I'm still waiting for that.
Are you still recording, by the way?
Thank you. That was my question. I appreciate it. Oh, yeah.
Carlos, are you still recording?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, he's
recording
recording.
everything. I'm still recording everything.
That's why I'm not saying names.
No,
Yeah,
yeah. Well,
I'd say
I
let's
tell
put
you.
that on pause for a second.
Okay, you cannot break back, man. I'm already in there. So, I mean, I normally have these sessions like up to 2 hours. We were like close to 30 minutes. We have a good time here for questions, answer, comments. Buy Girl Scouts cookies for my daughter, whatever you feel like. So, if there's any other questions, I'll be glad to entertain. I'm not going to say I give you back your time, because you never lost any time. You think the time was valuable. I want to say thank you to Melissa to do that. I mean, I walk away learning a lot, and probably not learning a lot. Probably know, hey, Carlos, you don't know squat. Put this way, because a lot of other stuff in there. But I really like it. What I was trying to share here, that people, as Fat was giving me a hard time, is pretty much for your own folks to take a look, because people ask. Okay, so let me know when you can see the screen again.
The merch, yes.
Yeah, so that's pretty much, people ask me, how do you get this fancy shirt? Well, these things are right there, and anybody can buy it. Okay, it would be nice if I could give a lot. I mean, I have a little budget that I can give things away. I'm just gonna put here on the chat so that people can take a look on that. The other thing that's very important is to keep the community real. So with that said, our next event is 2 weeks from today. It's going to be exactly the same time, and this will be Lilith. She's another CTA, is another female. When I started the group, I discussed this with Melissa. It's very important for me personally to have people representation. So I want to see as many diversity that I can have in there. It's people from US, people from Asia, whatever they find talent doesn't recognize geographic. So Lilith is going to be, she's in Brussels. So it's going to be kind of late for her, 5 hours ahead, like 11 p.m. But she said, Carlos, I do it. You don't need to put it anytime earlier than that. So take a look, okay, on the event here, if it's appealing for you. And with that said, I can stop sharing, stop recording,